Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amor de Soi Wellness, and Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hi everyone, how's it going?
Hey.
So today we're going to be talking about fear and, the impact of fear and some of the ways that we can address it, especially since, the thing going on right now seems to be the fear of the coronavirus. We'll touch on that, but we're going to be talking about just fear in general. So, Donovan, what are your thoughts about fear?
Yeah, so kind of my first just initial thoughts are that fear is something that it really stops us from doing something, right? Like that's kind of what the signal is, or it pushes us to doing something, right? But it's some sort of like change in action. It's not like I was going to go to this place, now I'm afraid, now I'm just going to keep going, right? Without some extra effort or some like management of the signal.
Mm-hmm.
So I think to me, what the context that fear most often comes up in now, and don't get me wrong, there are situations where, an urgent event happens that triggers fear. But for the most part, I think a lot of it now is in taking action, right? There's some sort of, I'm going to do this thing, or I want to do this thing. And then fear creeps up.
Right.
And I guess there's actually, at this point, a good distinction to make between fear from, I would guess, something like the unknown or some sort of a challenge, right? That's when you're going to take action. And fear from, I guess it's still the same thing, right? It's still not quite knowing if something is safe. That makes you want to avoid some sort of topic. I don't know. I would like to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think it's like twofold in a way that, there is a fear of unknown, but I also think a lot of that fear comes from our past experiences because maybe something similar happened and it didn't turn out the way we wanted. So now we're afraid to like put ourselves out there and put ourselves at risk. Like, for example, if I said I love you to a boy, on the third date, and then he like freaked out, and then then I was like, oh, that's a signal to say, oh, maybe I should wait a little longer before I say I love you to someone if I'm dating someone, because he might freak out and run away. But that's like, I don't know if I'm going to be feeling it at date 3, but just the fear of what happened in the past is preventing me from doing it again. So now I have to wait the appropriate time. That's like 2 months, 5 months, 1 year. I don't know. I don't know what the standard is now. But basically, that's an example of how the past is kind of like determining our fears in life. And that's what holds us back.
Yeah, it's like some sort of a projection of what we expect to happen if we take a certain sort of action, or like a projection of something we want to avoid, which
Right.
is interesting.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, but I just don't think necessarily our projections of what we think will happen, like the likelihood of that happening is kind of skewed in our brain. Maybe that scenario, it could happen. But for people who have fear of flying, the percentage of that happening, there's always the chance, but you're more likely to die in a car than on a plane. But still people freak out more from planes than cars. So the likelihood of something happening, even though it's not realistic, it still has a hold on us and may hold us back from, like, let's say if you had a fear of flying and you really wanted to go to Europe, but now that's holding you back in life and you don't get to experience all the amazing food and culture that place has to offer.
Yeah, so I guess there's a difference, what you're hitting on is the difference between realistic fears and unrealistic fears.
Mm-hmm.
And many of the fears that commonly hold people back seem to fall in the more unrealistic bucket, which is to say that, like, it is possible that a plane crash happens.
Yeah.
But if you look at the statistics and you look at the odds of taking any individual flight, like you were saying, car crashes are much more likely and much more dangerous.
Right.
So I think that's an important distinction, is that a lot of the fears now, or a lot of the fears that people have in daily life, are more based on kind of these mental calculations, many of which are just wrong projections of the likelihood of whatever the negative event is.
Right. And it's just like, yeah, there's always going to be a small risk at anything you do in life, but is it worth avoiding that thing? What are you going to gain out of whatever experience you are going to take on? Like if you're going to ask out a girl and she says no, but if she says yes, then that's like a potential, love of your life. But if you never ask, then that's never going to happen. I don't know if you've heard that thing where things you want in your life, but you were too afraid to ask for, like, let's say 100 times you wanted to ask for something and you didn't, like ask a girl out or ask for a promotion or ask for something that was important to you, but you were held back by fear. But if you had gone ahead and asked, maybe 50 of those would have been yes, or maybe 20, or maybe 2. But whatever the number is, it's like 2 yeses is way better than 0 yeses out of 100 tries. So it's, why not take your chances?
Yeah, so specifically in the realm of just asking for stuff, there's a couple people that I know, very, very small number of people, that will do things like ask for a discount at every restaurant, everywhere, every single place.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Or every store or every whatever. And it's actually surprising how often that somebody is like, oh yeah, sure, we have some sort of a deal. Oh, we have some sort of a discount. We have some sort of a thing. Like they never ask, and I think the way that they do it is important, because it's not like, come on, like I know you could do better, but it's like a very casual, just, hey, do you guys have any specials or deals or like memberships or anything that like would help me out with this? Yeah. And it's just crazy how often they get something out of it, and it's just from asking. Now, the small handful of people I know are a lot more outgoing than the average person, I would say. But that doesn't mean that we can't build up to stuff like that. And that doesn't mean everyone should go out and ask for discounts for everything everywhere. That's
no, I am.
But just getting past some of these initial fears and getting a little bit more comfortable with asking for things,
right,
can really make a big difference, because I think we underestimate a lot of times how much of an influence we have by asking for stuff, as well as, I will say personally, I often overestimate how terrible something's going to be that I'm afraid of doing if it goes wrong. So I do not like making phone calls most of the time. Right. I have no idea why that's built into my head. Every time I just actually dial and talk to someone, it's fine.
Right.
No problem with it, unless I let the fear kind of build up and like, oh no, what am I going to say? How's this conversation going to go? What are they going to want? Like, I'm the one calling them, but whatever. It's so strange how these threads can just kind of go and grow and project into this terrible experience, when in reality, like we were saying before, realistic and unrealistic, just is completely unrealistic. Like the worst case scenario, if I called someone and I don't know what to say, and it's I don't know, some kind of important like scheduling call or something, just like, okay, I don't know, goodbye. Like the actual consequences, I guess, is what I'm getting at, are not that bad.
Right. No, exactly. And when you think of the worst case scenario, that really is that one. It's not really. It's the worst case scenario, so that's a small chance of that happening in itself. But you also have to factor in like the more likely scenario. You have a great conversation, or you just connect with a friend, and that's all that happens. But yeah, we tend to exaggerate things in our head. And I think the other thing is important to do is to distinguish, yeah, you have thoughts, and your thoughts don't necessarily mean that they're real. Just separate the two ideas, that like there's reality and there's actually all the noise in your head that is never going to go away, but it's just noise, and just distinguishing the noise from what's happening.
Yeah, going back just a little bit, that is actually one of the specific things I try to do when I'm feeling fear personally, is figure out what is the very worst scenario that could happen from this. Like what's the very, very worst thing.
Right.
And most of the time, if not all the time, the consequences are really low. Like, oh, I might get rejected from this thing and I'll feel bad for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And then I also, like you were saying, try to figure out what's the most likely scenario, right? Which is maybe the chances of getting rejected are still high, but I'm only going to feel bad about it for 3 minutes with another half chance or whatever of getting some kind of super cool opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, as like a practical standpoint and managing fear, that's exactly the process that I go through to try to work through it. Now, it doesn't make the fear, like the feeling itself, disappear,
Right.
but it usually gives me enough of a clear picture and a clear path in my head to move forward through it, knowing that, okay, there's this feeling. This feeling is trying to prevent me from running into this really, really awful experience.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of thought it out, and that bad of an experience is not likely or even possible,
Right.
depending on what's going on. So I'm just going to feel it anyway, but keep moving forward. I'd be curious to know if you have any like tools or friends that you use specifically in instances of fear. Like if you're going to do something and feel the feeling, what do you do?
I think generally, I'm trying to think. I generally kind of worked myself. I think I've trained myself to, not let fear hold me back and just take the action anyways, as long as I see that it's, reasonable. As long as the risk isn't like death, then usually, but even then I'll be like open to doing it. But I was just trying to think of a situation where I've been afraid recently. I guess maybe in my business, just the fear of doing a marketing program I recently invested in a few months ago. That was a big risk, and that was like I could lose all my money, which is like thousands of dollars, and that's something that I'm not okay with because I've done that. But that was what I did to get out of that. Was I really like asked as many questions as possible. Normally it was supposed to be like a 45-minute call, and I ended up spending like 2 hours with him trying to like work out, understand all the logistics and how it works and every little aspect of it. And I was still afraid to take that lunge and like give him my credit card. And I just decided, nobody, if I don't have successful marketing, if I keep trying to do it on my own, I'm only going to get so far. And where I'm getting now on my own is not sufficient to where I want to be in my life. So I realized I need outside help. And so I was like, if I want to get to a point, like I'm at point B, I want to get to point C. I'm missing something in my own experiences and whatever I'm doing, because I was like networking, I was going to healthcare practitioners and I was holding workshops, I was posting on social media, I was doing all these things, and it wasn't like making much of a difference. So I was like, okay, I think I really need a marketing program that works. And I've been burned a lot of times in the past, and that my past was getting in my way of like, I've blown a lot of money on things that didn't work. I'm not sure if it's gonna happen. But the way he laid it out, and then he was like, if you don't get one single client in 90 days, then I'll give you a full refund. So that kind of helped ease my mind. And so I did invest in it, and I did end up getting, quite a number of clients and long-term clients that would sign up for like a 6-month program versus, just pay as you go, which is how I've been doing it. So I think that was a really good program for me to invest in, and it was worthwhile, and it did pay itself. But if I didn't take that risk, I wouldn't be where I am in my business. And that was scary for me, like a financial thing. Yeah.
So I heard a couple things that I want to touch on and kind of generalize a little bit, which is one, I heard that one of the things that you did was basically as much research as you could. Like there was never a point where you could say, I know for sure this is going to work for me. But you made sure to get all the details or as much relevant information as you could, as well as it was extra nice in this situation that they gave you the kind of automatic win type of deal in terms of if it doesn't work, if it really genuinely doesn't work at all, you can get, your money back type of thing. So I think that's one point that's interesting, like just getting more information to kind of make you feel more confident about moving forward. It sounds like another thing that really helped you manage that feeling was knowing the reason you needed to take that action, right? Or like the goals or values associated that you wanted to fulfill, that there wasn't really another path. I mean, maybe there is some other path, but not like a visible path besides kind of dealing with that fear of, okay, I have to pay for this. I don't know if I'm going to get results, but I do know that if I keep doing what I've been doing, I'm not getting the results that I want. That was the other piece.
Yeah, exactly.
That really helps. I know for me personally, that also helps me work through a lot of the fear, not because again, the emotion stays there, hangs out, but just knowing that like, okay, I can stay in the same spot and not make progress on this and not feel this fear or go through this experience that creates fear. But that's almost worse. I mean, I guess there's some situations where it's not, right? Like if it's like, I'm scared to skydive, and it's like, what do you get from skydiving? Nothing, just the experience of skydiving. So that's up to you if thrill is worth it versus feeling fear. But for a lot of these other choices, there's bigger implications in terms of getting the stuff done that you actually want to in life.
Right. Well, like I just think of the situation where, someone wants like a long-term relationship, but every night they're sitting at home watching TV instead of actually putting themselves out there on a date. And it's just like it doesn't line up if you want a long-term partner, but you're not putting yourself out there, so you're not taking the actions, whether it's swiping on apps to get on to some dates, or I don't know, going out to activities where you could like interact with people. That would be the action that would get you the result, but not everyone's willing to take the action because, there's the risk of heartbreak or rejection, and you're not going to die if someone says no. Probably not. Hopefully. Yeah.
I mean, that's the same. It just goes back to the worst case scenario type of thing, right? So in that case, the very worst case is you go out on some date and it's terrible.
Yeah, and it's terrible.
You get a story out of it. At least you're gonna get, if it's that bad.
I know, I have such great stories from like when I was back at dating.
So that's how I have looked at it in the past, or tried to get others who were in the same boat, who were like, I want a partner, but I don't want to go look for one. Okay, but you have to go try, and that's how I would try to frame it to them, is like, you get something out of it. You either get a good story or a good time.
Like,
you get something.
It's something, yeah.
I do think it's important too that, especially for repeated tasks, right? There's something like this marketing thing may have been a one-off, but dating is probably not going to be a one-off unless you're super lucky. But every time you go through the experience, I feel like the fear is a little bit less. That doesn't mean it goes away, but you get more tools to manage whatever the situation is. Right. So if you had gone through, I don't know, 5 marketing campaigns and it sounded like you had done some stuff in the past that didn't quite work. Yeah. But like, as you go through each experience, you gain tools for the next experience. It sounded like you had a better idea of what to look for in this program because you got burned in the other ones. Now it sucks. Like, it's not fun to go through those experiences, but I think that also helps reduce fear over time as you pick up more and more of the pieces, and there's less and less ways to get burned, right? If you go on a date, and a lot of people who are just starting to date again, it seems like they're very much in their head around like, I really want this to go well, and they're super nervous, and they're super concerned that if it goes bad, then that was their one date, and they blew it, and it's over. But if you talk to people who've been going on many dates over months, by that point, they're just like, yeah, well, I have another date, whatever, we'll see what happens. I don't even know. Like, and there's just such a difference in how much fear, I think, is experienced between the frequency of doing a certain action.
Right. No, I agree. Although as far as that dating thing, I think sometimes if you had repeated dates that didn't turn out the way you would hope, then possibly resignation might creep in there, and that's a whole nother video that we could talk about, essentially. Yes, but yeah, that's the
Yeah, that is
idea.
true.
Yeah, and I think there's something that goes for, even if it's a bad experience, that you also get to be a determinant of how the experience goes. Like if you go into every date thinking, if he doesn't hit all my check boxes, then this is a terrible date versus, no, this is, not expecting like this is going to be the one, but just like, this is an opportunity, a new human being, and get to know someone. And yeah, maybe there'll be some sparks, maybe not, but it's going out better than on the couch. So yeah.
I think there's a difference in mindset to be noted here, right? Which is there is a way that you can go into situations where you're fearful that if they turn out poorly,
Mm-hmm.
that compounds fear for next time, and
Right.
you don't necessarily get anything out of it.
Right.
And there's another way that you can, even if it goes poorly, kind of find some things to improve for the next time. But it totally makes sense to me if you go on 10 dates in a row and every single one is horrible,
Right.
how that could kind of like keep
Yeah.
increasing or I guess decreasing confidence and increasing fear in
Yeah.
terms of every single one I've went on has gone horribly. The next one will probably also go horribly.
Right.
So I do think there is something to be said for the importance of, especially for actions or tasks that we feel fearful around,
Mm-hmm.
having the right mindset or having a mindset that helps in the
Mm-hmm.
future, which is to say that if we just keep doing the same things, feeling fear, not learning anything from the experience, then it does seem likely to continue having bad outcomes. So there probably is some instances where change needs to happen or the strategy needs to be reevaluated. Like if you had just poured money over and over and over again into these marketing avenues that weren't producing results,
Right.
then it would make sense to be afraid, I guess, or to feel fear around like, I'm going to lose this money and I'm going to lose this money. But even then, I think at some point it's less fear because like you've gone down this path so many times.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, this is going to have the same outcome. So it would make sense to me that if somebody's facing that situation,
Mm-hmm.
that it might make sense to step back and actually evaluate the overall strategy, right? Like if 50 dates in a row have not gone well, not like, hey, some went kind of neutral and some were bad, but like all of them were really bad, there's probably some tweak that needs to happen in the approach of that action, which will more likely produce better results.
Yeah. And actually that little tweak, I think if you had 50 bad dates in a row, I definitely think there's something to look within yourself to explore what's going on. And you go in expecting it to be a bad day. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy where it ends up being a bad date because how you're being on the date is like, oh, this is a bad date. And it's like, who wants to be with someone who's like all grumbly and like, dates, boo, versus like, oh yeah, a date, awesome. So just maybe think of your mood and your attitude and your energy. What you bring into the day is what you get out. So if you're bringing all this resentment about dating into the date, then, what do you expect? So the other thing I really wanted to touch on today was, what's going around the world right now is this fear of the coronavirus. And I get that it's a legitimate fear for sure, and it has been spreading fast. But I feel like on the other end of the spectrum is that the fear is overtaking where people are like stockpiling, clearing out Costco from toilet paper and other hygiene products, or they're not being willing to take public transit or things that are really, really stopping them in life. And I'm just noticing how it's impacting our just every day-to-day actions. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so for me, and obviously I'm not a health expert in any way,
Yeah.
but to me, kind of the evolution of my thought process was at first, hearing about some of the stuff, some of the spread. I went and looked at, okay, what are the actual symptoms? What are the rates, right? How dangerous is this, and who is most likely to be impacted?
Right.
And for me, when I kind of looked at that information, I was like, it's not very likely to be me that has a very bad outcome from this.
Right.
So that brought my anxiety level way down.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the next level, I'm thinking about like, okay, just because it's not impacting me personally,
Mm-hmm.
still there are broader implications. So like, what does this mean for the people I care about? And still, for the most part, not many people that I know have potential negative impacts from this. So anyway, just looking kind of at the data that does exist, which seems to be like a little bit up in the air, but relatively known. It just didn't seem like to me the type of thing to go out and like I need to get toilet paper and I need to get all these other things. Like, I also thought it was very strange that bottled water is getting bought up everywhere. This doesn't seem like the kind of thing that affects the water supply. So it's not like it's okay, all right. So I don't know. For me, basically, it was kind of looking at and trying to get as grounded of a picture as I can based on my expertise, which is not super strong, but looking at what experts are saying, looking at just kind of general information that's out there, that trying to find realistic facts, not
Right.
yeah, and then basing it from there. And I don't think that the reactions have been justified, but I also don't know if everyone has had access to the same information, right? Like, I don't know what other people are looking at that's making them more concerned. I'd be very curious to hear more of your opinion, since you actually do have some medical training, like more expertise than I do in the realm.
Yeah, I mean, I think again it is a legitimate concern, but I think the media tends to blow things way out of proportion, and then it like instills more fear, and then it just this vicious loop of more fear, more extremes. But the implications is like, maybe people are buying out all like face masks or stealing them from the hospitals, and then the people that actually need them, hospital workers, are not having access to it, which is not okay with me. Or people needing toilet paper or bottled water. I feel like it's getting us in every man for itself mentality versus, hey, we're a community and we got to support each other in this. And overall, the risks right now, at least in the US, is pretty low. I mean, and if you were to acquire it, unless you're age 60 and over, or you have a compromised immune system or other health conditions that weaken your immune function, or other health conditions, then you're at like slightly risk. I think there's only like a 2% chance of death, which is still considerable if we're looking at like millions of people. But overall, just for you and I'm not generally interacting with super sick people or elderly people on a day-to-day basis. So for me, what all healthcare professionals are saying, what we already should have been doing before this broke out, is like washing our hands for a certain amount of time, 20-30 seconds with soap, and being thorough with it. That is the only recommendation that everyone, that's just to prevent also like the flu and other colds and other illnesses as well. But we have to be mindful of our hygiene, and yeah, we could take those precautions, but to like overdo it with buying out all the water supply out of all the grocery stores is a little extreme. And not being willing to go to a graduation or a wedding because you're afraid of being in a public space, that's missing out on something that's really going to have an impact in your relationships. But I get it, you have to like assess your own risk factors and decide for yourself. But if you let the fear win, it's not going to go anywhere. But I realize how like big it's been impacting the world in a lot of ways, with trade and the stock market crash basically. And yeah, I think what I heard, I don't know if this is accurate, but postponing or canceling the Olympics. And I was like, really? Are you serious? That's pretty extreme measures. So
Yeah, I think a lot of the like second wave effects
yeah.
of what people are doing are going to be more impactful. And this is just one small example, but I actually really needed toilet paper last weekend. And when I went to the store, I had to go to 3 stores because the first 2 were completely wiped out. And I haven't been fearful around the actual infections.
Yeah.
But when I saw that, I was like, well, now I feel I need to buy up as much toilet paper as I can
Right.
because I'm almost in a situation where I don't have any. And like, it's important. So I think whatever percentage or whatever number of people are actually really scared and starting to do some of these behaviors, it ripples out into all kinds of other stuff. Because like, okay, I was able to catch that thought and be very aware of like what's going on and whatnot. But there's another version of me who would have just been like, no, like I really need toilet paper. Like, where am I going to get this? I need to get like 50 of these. I need to stock up. And then all of a sudden there's all kinds of just after wave of problems built on this first thing.
Right. No, I agree. I think for me, it's not so much the fear of the virus itself, but it is kind of the fear of the fear, like all this fear that's going around and all the impact that it's having in the world is kind of scary. And it's like you're way more likely to die the flu, which is way more common, but I guess this is a new thing, and you know, it's uncertain, but we've gone through situations in the past like the swine flu and you know, all sorts of different things. And I think it does tend to get blown way out of proportion. Should just like throw caution to the wind and just do whatever we want, but just to be, you know, mindful of how that fear is stopping us from having like a full life. And then do you really want a life that's just sitting in your, you know, bomb shelter for weeks because you're afraid of interacting with people? Yeah, you gotta weigh the odds and decide for yourself.
Yeah, so it's like what you said earlier. I think for individuals who have risk factors, it very much makes sense to kind of like hide yourself away and hang out and wait and not go to a bunch of really packed social events. But I don't know how it is around there, but around here, like everything is not necessarily getting shut down, but going remote if possible. It's been incredible because there's no traffic.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
but like everyone is kind of hunkering down, and it's interesting to me because, like you said, there's going to be a lot of events that get missed or canceled or postponed, and a lot of just like things that make life more enjoyable or really important events that are just canceled. And to me, I don't know if that makes sense, but again, I'm not an expert. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how it plays out over the next couple weeks and if people are actually out doing things and if things pick up or if people really do just wait it out and stay home for, I don't know, a month or whatever.
Yeah. I think it's just to miss out. And, you know, I feel like we are taking, you know, officials and the government and healthcare workers are taking the steps that are necessary. Like I had a friend that went to Japan and she came back, not necessarily with any symptoms, but she had to be like quarantined for a week and just wait to get tested before going out. She couldn't go to work. Her kid couldn't go to daycare. So I think they're taking the precautions, given that they're going to that extreme. That actually makes me feel more comfortable being out in public because I know that people are taking the extreme steps to make sure that it doesn't spread. So yeah, I think it goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of this episode of what is the likelihood of that thing actually, worst case scenario, happening, and what is the benefit of, or what are you going to get out of, like, if you take that risk and go to that public event? What are you missing, or what are you not getting? What result are you wanting but you can't have because of the fear?
I think that's a good way to look at it, is just to get a realistic idea of, or as realistic as you can based on the information that's out there, of the pros and cons of doing certain things. Because again, it goes down to how likely is whatever the thing in real life, not in your head. Because a lot of times we end up with these super distorted probabilities of how we think things are going to turn out.
Right. Yes. Absolutely. Great. Well, I think we covered fear pretty well today. So thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.